Good evening, and welcome back to Scripted Fear. Tonight, we are venturing deep into the frozen wilderness of Alaska, with 10 of the most disturbing, true Alaskan horror stories ever recorded. These testimonies come from dispatchers, pilots, researchers, and seasonal workers who encountered something in the last frontier that defies all explanation. Each account represents a nightmare carved into Alaska's most remote corners, where the endless night swallows sound, the cold preserves more than just bodies, and the wilderness conceals truths no human was meant to see. What you are about to hear was pulled from official reports, personal journals, and intercepted transmissions, fragments of terror that were never meant to reach the outside world. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Scripted Fear for true horror stories that will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. And hit that notification bell so you never miss when the Arctic winds carry whispers of the unspeakable. Before we begin, tell me something. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Where you are? I wonder who else is awake with you. Now let us journey into Alaska's frozen silence, where survival is never guaranteed and sometimes the dead make the calls themselves. 3 winters ago, I was working night dispatch for the Alaska State Troopers when I received a call that I will never forget for as long as I live. My name is Daniel Reyes, and I've been answering emergency calls out of Anchorage for more than 10 years. I thought I had grown immune to horror. I'd heard people bleed out live on the line. I'd listened to parents scream over lifeless children. I'd sat through calls where people begged me to save them, while all I could do was keep them talking until the sirens arrived too late. After enough years, the voices blur together and you learn how to bury them. But not this one. February 14th, 2021, a night so cold the pipes inside the station cracked. The kind of cold that makes you question if the sun will ever rise again. Anchorage had been locked in sub-zero temperatures for over 2 weeks. -30 on the official thermometer, lower in the valleys. The streets were empty, the highways abandoned. The quiet on the radios was unnatural, like even trouble had frozen solid. At 2:46 a.m., my console lit up with an incoming emergency call. The number wasn't familiar, but that was nothing new. Out here, people called from old rotary landlines, prepaid burners, or static-choked satellite phones. But this call came through clear, unnervingly clear. No hiss, no crackle, no delay. I answered. Alaska State Troopers, this is Reyes. What's your emergency? The voice that spoke was calm, steady, male, with a faint Russian edge. My name is Nikolai Vostrikov. I'm calling to report my own death. I froze. People make strange calls in Alaska. Cabin fever breaks men. Solitude gnaws at the mind. But this wasn't laughter or hysteria or drunken nonsense. His words landed like iron. Sir, say that again. Are you injured? Do you need medical help? No, he said. I am not injured. I am dead. I died 3 days ago at my cabin near Talkeetna. My body is still there. Someone must come before the wolves do. I pulled his name through our database as I typed notes. Nikolai Vostrikov, age 72. Resident of Talkeetna backcountry. No next of kin listed. But something else popped up. There was already a welfare check. Request filed by his neighbor 2 days earlier. The neighbor hadn't seen smoke from Nikolai's chimney, unusual for a man who never let his fire die. I asked, Nikolai, where exactly is your cabin? Mile marker 47 on the Parks Highway, he said slowly, like he wanted every word to stick. Then 12 miles east on the mining road. Blue metal roof. Chimney cold for 3 days. He was describing the exact same location the neighbor had reported. I tried to ground myself in protocol. Nikolai, your neighbor was concerned. Are you in the cabin right now? Yes, he said. I am in the kitchen, looking out the window. But my body is behind the house. Face down in the snow. The axe is still in my hand. My lips are purple. The snow around my head is red where I struck it on the ground. My hands trembled over the keyboard. If you can see your body, Nikolai. Where are you calling from? The phone, he said simply. The phone in my hand. But you don't understand. Each day I am less. Yesterday I still felt the cold. Today I feel nothing. Tomorrow I will forget how to use the phone. This is my last chance. The air in the room seemed to thin. I glanced at the signal. Strong, clear, crisp, impossible. I kept him talking. His voice was steady, patient, like a man filing a routine report. He told me he had lived in that cabin for 37 years. He described the books on his shelf, the rifle above his door, the smell of the wood stove that had not burned in days. But then he said something that made my blood run colder than the weather. "You have a photograph of your children on your desk," he said. "Two boys, one with a baseball cap." My heart stopped. I did have a photograph, my son's, but there was no way he could see it through a dead, disconnected line. I stammered, How do you know that?" Silence stretched, then, "When you cross the threshold, you see everything." By now, the responding unit was on the way. 2 troopers, Martinez and O'Connor, slogging down the icy highway toward mile marker 47, 25 minutes out. I just had to keep Nikolai on the line. I asked him about the moment he died. He described splitting firewood, the pain in his chest, the way the axe slipped from his hand as his vision went dark. He said he remembered falling into the snow, and then suddenly standing in the kitchen, looking through the frost-crusted window at his own frozen corpse. There was no tunnel, he said. No light. Only silence. Silence so thick it had weight. And when I breathed, I realized I had no breath at all. The line stayed sharp, every syllable etched into my ears. The patrol unit radioed in. They had eyes on the mining road. The snow was deep, but the tire tracks from a month ago still cut faint scars in the ice. They were 15 minutes out. I told Nikolai, "Stay with me. Help is almost there." "You cannot help me," he said. "You can only bury me. But promise me this. Promise me they will not let the wolves feed. I promise." He sighed. Or maybe it was just the air moving through something that wasn't lungs. "Thank you. That is all a man can ask for. A proper end." The troopers broke through the trees. Radio static, then Martinez's strained voice. "Dispatch. We've got a cabin with a blue roof. No smoke from the chimney. Approaching now." I whispered into the receiver. "Nikolai, they're here." A pause. "Good, tell them I'm sorry for the trouble." Seconds later, the radio crackled again. "Dispatch, we have a body. Male, elderly, frozen solid. Appears deceased for at least 3 days. Cardiac event. Axe in his right hand." My screen still showed the call connected. 36 minutes and counting. I spoke softly. "Nikolai, are you still there?" Silence. Then breathing. Not human breathing. Wet, ragged, like air forcing its way through collapsed cartilage. The line went dead. The patrol confirmed the details. No generator power, no fuel. Phone line cut last winter when a spruce collapsed over the wires. That phone should not have worked. And yet I had spoken to him for 37 minutes. I had notes across 47 screens. I didn't put the truth in my report. Who would believe me? I logged it as an anonymous welfare tip and kept the rest for myself. But sometimes when I drive near Talkeetna at night, my radio will catch a phantom signal. 37 minutes of empty line. The faintest rattle of a crushed windpipe in the dark. And I wonder how many other voices are still out there in the frozen wilderness, calling in their own deaths from phones that should not ring. Her name was Isabella Marquez, and she was one of the most fearless people I've ever met. She was a wildlife photographer who spent nearly a decade documenting Alaska's most remote and unforgiving landscapes, while other photographers chased grizzlies in the summer or caribou migrations in the fall. Isabella thrived where no one else dared go: winter. I met her in 2019 when I was working as a field guide for researchers and documentarians heading into the backcountry. Most photographers came prepared with expensive lenses and rented gear, but very little tolerance for suffering. Isabella was different. She moved through the snow as if she belonged to it. She had an obsessive eye for detail, and her photographs captured things no one else noticed. Wolves dissolving into blizzards like ghosts, the northern lights bleeding across ice fields, an entire valley frozen in silence so deep you could feel it pressing against your ribs. But Isabella wasn't just after beauty. She wanted truth, the things nature hid from human eyes. And in the winter of 2021, she set her sights on a phenomenon she called ice ghosts. She had studied decades of weather logs, cross-referenced old photographs, even scoured miners' journals from the 1940s. She believed that in the coldest pockets of the Wrangell Mountains, where temperatures fell lower than anywhere else in the state, atmospheric moisture didn't just crystallize into frost. under certain conditions. She believed it formed impossible structures, apparitions, made of frozen air, figures, shapes, sculptures nature didn't intend. She called them ice ghosts. The site she picked was an abandoned mining camp 60 miles northeast of McCarthy, deserted since World War II. No road access, no cell towers, just a cabin she rented from an outfitter, a place that hadn't seen a human winter in decades. I tried to talk her out of it. Temperatures there dropped to -50, sometimes lower. The air itself could freeze your lungs if you pushed too hard. But Isabella was stubborn. She showed me her gear, a state-of-the-art camera rig built for subarctic temperatures, an emergency beacon, food and fuel for 3 weeks, and a satellite communicator for daily check-ins. She promised she'd message me at 8 p.m. sharp every night. One missed day, I'd alert search and rescue. That was our deal. On December 15th, a bush pilot named Tom dropped her at the cabin with her equipment. For the first 3 days, everything went smoothly. Day 1 arrived safe. Cabin intact. Temp -32. Perfect shooting conditions. Day 2. Incredible formations near old equipment. Light here is otherworldly. Day 3. Found something near mine entrance. Not like anything I've seen before. Staying another day to document. By the 4th night, her messages started to change. Day 4. They're moving. I have time-lapse footage. They shift when I'm not looking. I read that line 3 times trying to make sense of it. Ice formations don't move. Wind knocks them down, storms reshape them. But they don't creep from one position to another when no one's watching. Day 5, I was wrong. They aren't ice. I don't know what they're made of, but they're not natural. They appear in my photos even when I can't see them. Now I was worried. Cold and isolation break even strong minds, and Isabella had only been there 5 days. Still, her tone wasn't frantic. It was clinical, like she was documenting a species. Day 6, they know I'm photographing them, more in each shot, either multiplying or getting closer. Her words made my chest tighten. I messaged her immediately asking if she wanted an early pickup. No response. Day 7, there are photos on my camera I didn't take. Timestamps show they were captured while I was sleeping. Someone is using my equipment. That's when I called Tom, the pilot. Weather was rough, but he promised to do a flyover as soon as the skies cleared. Day 8. The photos I didn't take show the inside of the cabin. Me sleeping in the bunk, but there are shapes standing around the bed. I felt sick reading it. She wasn't just photographing strange ice anymore. Something was in the cabin with her. Day 9. I understand. The camera sees what human eyes can't. These aren't ghosts. They've always been here. The lens reveals them. Tom flew over the next morning. From the air, the cabin looked fine. Smoke curled from the chimney. Gear sat neatly outside. No signs of distress, but the winds were brutal, so he couldn't land. Isabella's check-in that night only deepened the dread. Day 10. I've reviewed every photo from the trip. The figures were in them from the very beginning, even before I noticed. They were here waiting. Day 11. I left the camera running on a motion trigger overnight. This morning there were 847 new shots, all between midnight and 6 a.m., all showing the same thing. Dozens of tall, thin figures surrounding the cabin, watching. She attached one of the photos. I wish I had never opened it. At first it looked like static in the snow, but then my eyes adjusted. Dark, crystalline figures, jagged and impossibly tall, crowding the cabin. Some leaned toward the windows. Some bent over her equipment, and every single one faced the camera. I called Tom again, told him we needed to pull her out immediately. The weather delayed us, but we began planning a full ground team rescue. Her next messages were not what I expected. Day 12, they aren't hostile. They're curious. When I show them photos, they lean close, as if studying themselves. I think they've never seen their own reflection before. Day 13, I understand now. They want to be seen, to be documented. That's all they've ever wanted. Her final message came on day 14, I'm staying. This is the most important work of my life. Don't send Tom. Don't send anyone. They're ready now and I have to finish. That was the last time I ever heard from Isabella. When she missed her day 15 check-in, I contacted search and rescue. The storm delayed us 2 more days. On day 17, we finally reached the cabin. Inside, Isabella sat at the wooden table. Catatonic, eyes locked on hundreds of printed photographs spread across every surface. Her camera was still clicking automatically. The images it captured were worse than anything I'd ever seen. Figures filled every frame. tall, skeletal, crystalline beings, their bodies jagged like broken glass, but moving with intent. In some photos, they hovered over Isabella as she slept. In others, they appeared to be touching her shoulders, her face, her hair. And in the most recent shots, her posture was changing, her spine stiffening, her head tilting unnaturally, as if she was becoming something else. She was alive when we found her, but barely. Core temperature impossibly low, heart rate 12 beats a minute, eyes staring through us like glass. Doctors called it hypothermia and trauma, but the photos told another story. For 6 weeks in the hospital, she didn't speak. Then one night, she whispered her first words since the rescue. "They're still here." They followed me. She said she could see them now without the camera, standing in her hospital room, following doctors down the hall, watching her sleep. The doctors blamed psychosis, but I'd seen the images. I knew better. She never fully recovered. Months later, she vanished from her Anchorage apartment. Inside, we found thousands of photographs, parking lots, grocery stores, city sidewalks, and in every single picture, there they were. The ice ghosts, staring at us from the edges of our world. The final shots on her camera were taken in her own bedroom, but Isabella wasn't in them. The crystalline figures filled the frame, crowding close to the lens as if posing for a portrait. Her disappearance was ruled a missing persons case. I think she finally went where they wanted her to. Between the spectrum of light we can see and whatever place those things have always lived. I keep one of her photographs. A coffee shop downtown, ordinary on the surface. But in the corner, half hidden behind laughing customers, a jagged figure towers over them, faceless and crystalline. No one else sees it, but I can't stop. And sometimes when I glance at reflections in windows, I swear I see the same tall shapes watching me, waiting for their turn in the frame. The cannery was already dying before the real horror set in. It sat on the coast near Bristol Bay, a rusting skeleton left behind by the salmon boom of the 1980s. By the time I worked there in the summer of 2016, it was just a shadow. Barely 24 employees, cheap beer stacked higher than safety gear, and a bunkhouse that smelled like mold and regret. I was 19, broke, and desperate for a paycheck. Everyone was. The boss was a bitter old man named Avery. He'd worked canneries his whole life and treated every worker like a disposable cog. We worked 12 to 14 hours a day on slimy, blood-slick floors, feeding fish through rattling machines that screamed louder than the gulls outside. By week 3, most of us didn't talk anymore. Just mechanical movements, the stink of brine burned into our skin. But the strangest thing about that cannery wasn't the hours or the smell. It was the quiet. Normally, canneries roar with life. Metal clanging, forklifts beeping, men shouting over conveyor belts. But ours? Past midnight, the machines would hum low and then silence. Not a soul talking, not even the gulls outside. The entire building would settle into a kind of oppressive stillness, as if the walls themselves were listening. It was in that silence that things began. The first incident was with a man named Lester, one of the veterans. He was hauling bins down the corridor when he froze. Mid-step, hands gripping the handles, eyes wide. I thought maybe he'd thrown his back out, but when I touched his shoulder, he collapsed. Just dropped like his strings had been cut. He didn't speak when they carried him out. Didn't blink. He just stared, mouth slightly open, like he'd seen something so vast it shattered him. Avery called it heat exhaustion, though the cannery never rose above 45 degrees. Lester was flown to Anchorage. We never saw him again. The next week, another worker disappeared during the night shift. His boots and gloves were found neatly placed beside the conveyor, but the cameras showed nothing. Just static, 6 minutes of dead footage, as if the whole building had blinked. And then the whispers began. They came from the vents first, low, guttural, impossible to understand, vibrating through the ductwork when the generators dipped. You'd look up from gutting, salmon, and swear someone was speaking. Your name through the steam. Some of us ignored it. Some pretended it was just wind, but I know what I heard. They weren't voices meant for us. They were voices pushing through us. By July, the air inside the cannery grew heavier. Wetter, like the walls themselves were sweating. The smell shifted too. Not just fish rot, something fouler, almost metallic, like pennies left in water. One night after a 16-hour shift, I stumbled into the bunkhouse and collapsed on my cot. Sometime past 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of boots pacing the hallway. Heavy, deliberate, scraping slow. I sat up, expecting Avery or maybe another worker stumbling drunk. But the hall light wasn't on. The pacing didn't stop. I pushed open the door. Empty. The floor was wet, though. Soaked as if someone had dragged dripping nets through the hall. The next morning, no one mentioned it. Things escalated fast after that. Workers claimed to see figures in the cannery. Windows long after the machines shut down, tall, gaunt shadows bent over the conveyors, moving with jerks too fast for human joints. One man swore he saw someone standing waist-deep in a fish bin, head tilted back, mouth open as if drowning, though the bin was empty. Then came the night the power went out. The storm hit without warning. Winds howling off the bay, the kind of blackness where you can't see your own hands. The generators sputtered. The lights died. And in that blackout, I heard them. Not whispers. Not pacing, breathing. Dozens of ragged, hungry breaths filling the corridor, surrounding us in the dark. Men shouted, stumbled, knocked into each other, scrambling for flashlights. I dropped to the floor, crawling blind, palms sliding in something warm. Blood. When the backup generator sputtered to life, the room snapped into pale light. 3 men were gone, vanished. Only the smear of blood across the concrete. Dragged toward the ice lockers. We tore the place apart, but the freezers were empty. Empty except for one thing. A pattern carved into the frost. Long parallel grooves stretching across every wall, as if clawed by something enormous that had been waiting in the cold for decades. Avery refused to call the Coast Guard. He said we'd finish the season, collect our checks, and shut the place down quietly. No one argued. But from that night on, none of us slept. We worked through exhaustion. Because when you closed your eyes in that bunkhouse, you didn't dream. You saw. I saw men hanging upside down over the conveyors. Throats slit, fish sliding past them as if nothing was wrong. I saw the walls pulsing like gills, every surface dripping blood instead of brine. I saw faces pressed into the frost on the windows. Mouths wide open, screaming soundlessly at me. And every time I jolted awake, I swore I still heard them screaming in the pipes. By August, half the crew had quit, abandoning paychecks just to escape. The rest of us endured until the final shipment left. The cannery shut down that fall, permanently. A year later, I tried to look it up. Safety violations. Missing persons. Anything official. Nothing. No record of the men who disappeared. Not even Lester's medical transfer. As if every one of them had been erased. But I know what happened in that building. I still smell it in my sleep, that mix of rust, fish, and copper. And I know what I heard that night when the lights died, not whispers. Not breathing, feeding. Whatever haunts that cannery doesn't rest. It waits. And every so often I dream I'm back there, standing knee-deep in blood as the conveyors rattle back to life. And in those dreams I know, one day the machines will start up again for real. And when they do, I'll hear those voices in the vents calling my name, inviting me back to finish what I left behind. Bush pilots live by routine. When you're the only lifeline to towns carved into the Alaskan wilderness, the rhythm of your flights becomes second nature. Same faces, same drop-offs, same greetings at the strip. There's comfort in repetition until the day the repetition shatters. My name's Caleb Marks. 6 years running supply flights, and I thought I'd seen it all. Blizzards that erased the horizon. Mechanical failures miles from any safe landing. Even the silent recovery of wrecks where men didn't make it back. But nothing prepared me for Gray Harbor. A dot on the map, 120 people. A fishing village where the ocean pressed up against the cliffs, where storms beat so hard you'd think the world was ending, and where every landing felt like threading. A needle with 100 lives, depending on you. I knew those people. Not well, but enough. A boy who always begged me to bring comics. A woman who once slipped me fresh salmon. The mayor who shook my hand every landing. They were steady, reliable, alive. November 3rd, 2017. My log reads calm skies. Light winds, perfect visibility. A day so ordinary it should have passed into memory without a ripple. I descended over the bay, touched wheels to gravel, taxied toward the hangar, and waited. No one came. I idled for 5 minutes. 10, 15. the engine rumbling against, silence so deep it pressed in on my chest. Usually I'd see half the town by now, hauling crates, waving me in, calling my name. Instead, nothing. Not a gull, not a barking dog, just the propeller winding down into dead stillness. The hangar door was open, forklift in place, keys still dangling. I stepped out, boots crunching on frost, and walked through the yard. A chill crawled over me the moment I noticed the footprints, or rather the lack of them. Snow from the night before lay unbroken. No one had walked here. Not today, not yesterday. Inside the general store, the bell above the door chimed. Lights on, shelves stocked, a pot of coffee steaming on the counter, cups already poured, heat still curling upward. I shouted, my voice swallowed by buzzing fluorescence. Nobody answered. House to house, I found the same thing. Dors ajar, fires still burning, radios mumbling static and weather reports. A pan of stew simmering on the stove, bubbling quietly to itself. A half-written letter on a table, the ink smeared as if the hand had lifted mid-sentence and never returned. In one living room, a child's toy train circled its track, battery whining low, wheels squealing as if it had been running all night. On the couch, a blanket crumpled with the shape of a body that had only just risen. The air still held warmth like someone had breathed there moments before, but not a single soul. At first I thought evacuation, but where were the signs? No vehicles missing, no suitcases packed, no coats taken from racks. Even the dogs were gone. Their chains lay in the snow, collars still attached. I found the logbook in the clerk's office, a spiral notebook with neat records of every flight. I flipped through, scanning dates I recognized. My deliveries carefully logged by someone's hand. Then I reached the final entry, November 3rd, that same morning. Plane approaching. Pilot Caleb Marks scheduled. Do not let him land. Do not let him leave. The writing was mine. Every loop of every letter. My exact handwriting. But I had never written it. I felt a drop in my gut. I flipped ahead, hoping to find explanation. Every page after was blank, stretching on for dozens. Empty, waiting. That's when I heard the school bell, a single chime. High, hollow, the kind you'd hear at recess. I staggered outside, scanning rooftops. The schoolhouse loomed down the street, its door open wide. I stepped inside. Desks scattered, books fallen from shelves, chalk on the blackboard smudged into nonsense. In the back corner, tiny coats still hung on hooks. And on every desk, neat sheets of paper, crayon drawings, the same thing over and over. My plane, my face in the cockpit, dozens of versions, some childlike, some disturbingly precise. The swings outside creaked, moving in long, steady arcs, but the snow beneath was untouched. That's when the voices started. At first just one, low and thin, drifting across the yard, then another, and another, whispering my name. Caleb, soft, familiar, my own voice, repeated from every direction. The whispers grew into a chorus. From the windows, from the doorways, from the empty houses lining the street. 100 throats speaking in perfect unison, each one my tone, my breath, my laugh. I ran for the plane. The cabin door was already open. Frost rhymed the controls, gauges frozen solid. On the inside of the windshield, traced with a finger through the frost, were 2 words. Stay here. My reflection in the glass didn't match my movement. Its head turned slower. Its mouth curled into a smile I didn't make. Behind me, the laughter swelled. They stood in the streets. Dozens of them. My body, my face, my clothes, each copy frozen in place, heads tilting when I shifted. Their mouths opened in sync, spilling out laughter that wasn't laughter, a fractured echo of my own. And then they moved. Not running, not walking, sliding, jerked forward as if dragged by invisible strings, all toward me. I bolted into the trees, branches tearing at my arms, lungs searing. The voices followed, weaving through the trunks. Closer, then farther, then all around, until I couldn't tell if I was running toward safety or straight into their arms. By some grace, I stumbled onto a trapper's cabin miles away. A man hauled me inside, radioed for help, and I was flown out the next day. But when the search team combed Gray Harbor, nothing, no houses. No hangar, no bay, just snow. Endless white, as if the town had never stood there. They called it exhaustion. Said maybe I landed off course, hallucinated, lost my bearings. But I know what I saw. Because the logbook didn't vanish with the town. I still have it. And the pages aren't blank anymore. Every morning I wake to find another filled in. my handwriting, my name. Warnings written in my own hand, begging me to stop flying, to stop running, to stop breathing. Last night's entry chilled me worse than anything I saw in Gray Harbor. It didn't beg, it didn't warn. It only said, "You're home now." And beneath it, a second line, written in fresh ink, "Turn around." Alaska is full of holes carved by men who never lived to see what they uncovered. Mining shafts, oil rigs, ice tunnels cut to chase frozen rivers that shift beneath the earth. Some of those tunnels are mapped, most aren't, and a few should never have been opened in the first place. I heard this story from a pipeline worker named Daryl, who quit his job mid-contract, walked away from 6 figures, steady work, and a pension. People said he snapped, that the isolation got to him. But when you hear what he saw, when you feel the way he trembled telling it, you'll know he didn't just quit. He escaped. It started with a survey team checking stability along a northern stretch of pipeline near Prado Bay. Standard procedure. Check for shifting ice, cracks, stress points. The tundra is alive in its own way, and if you don't respect it, it'll swallow your steel whole. Daryl's crew stumbled on something not marked on any blueprint. A tunnel. Perfectly carved, like a frozen artery bored straight into the glacier. The mouth was wide, arched, rimmed with frost so thick it looked like glass. No blast marks, no signs of drills. It wasn't theirs. And it wasn't natural. Still, orders are orders. They were told to map it. Daryl, strapped on a headlamp, followed the crew chief inside. The air was sharp, metallic, biting their lungs. Every sound echoed wrong, like the ice didn't reflect noise but absorbed it, muffled it. Boots crunched, lamps hummed, but every breath vanished into silence. They walked deeper. 10 yards, 50, 100. The tunnel sloped down, spiraling. Walls glittering with trapped bubbles and fractures. And in those fractures, something else. Shapes, at first just shadows. Frozen ridges that looked like faces pressed against glass. A trick of light, until one of the men swore he saw an eye. Not a cloudy lump of ice, but an iris, staring back. Daryl brushed frost from the wall. His lamp lit it clear. A hand. Perfect. Human. Fingers splayed. Nails scratching against the ice as if clawing to get free. The detail was too sharp, too fresh. Not ancient. Not fossilized. And behind it, a face. The features were distorted, stretched long. The mouth open in a silent scream. Teeth too sharp, too many. But the eyes were awake, following him. He swore they moved. The crew chief barked for them to press on. Don't get spooked. But the deeper they went, the more of those figures appeared. Dozens, then hundreds. Bodies suspended in the walls like flies in amber. Some twisted into impossible shapes. Some curled like children, all watching. Their lamps began to flicker. Not die. Flicker. As though something else was feeding on the light. Then they heard it. A low groan rolling through the tunnel. Not ice cracking. Not settling. A voice. So deep it vibrated their ribs. A word they couldn't understand. Drawn out until the sound broke into static. One of the men bolted. His scream echoed, then cut off like a wire snapped. They found his headlamp later. Still glowing, lens cracked. Strap wet with blood. But no body. The others pushed deeper, terrified but bound to orders, until the tunnel opened into a chamber. A hollow sphere in the glacier, larger than a cathedral, ceiling vanishing into shadow. And at the center, a shape trapped in a column of ice. Taller than any man, broader than any machine. Its arms bent wrong, its torso lined with ridges like a carapace. The head tilted downward, horned, its mouth wide open. And the ice around it wasn't clear anymore. It was melting. Dripping, slow, steady. Every drop sizzled on the floor as if the ice itself was burning away. The men stood frozen, not daring to breathe. And then, it breathed back. A mist fogged the ice from inside. Hot, alive. Daryl swore he saw its chest rise. Swore he saw the horned head shift upward, just slightly, toward him. That's when he turned. The others didn't. He ran. They stayed hypnotized. Their voices followed him up the tunnel, first shouting, then laughing, then chanting something in a language he'd never heard. When he finally burst into the daylight, he looked back only once, and the tunnel mouth was gone. Not collapsed, not blocked, gone. Nothing but solid ice stretching across where it had been. The company sealed the report, filed it as a mapping error, said the missing man had fallen into a crevasse. Daryl knows better. He knows what's buried in the ice waiting, because nights when the wind cuts across the tundra, he hears them. Not the men, the voices. That groaning tongue whispering through the air. And sometimes in frozen puddles on the street, he sees reflections that aren't his own. There's something about Alaska's winter nights. They're not just dark, they're endless. The kind of dark that presses down on you, stretches time until it feels like you've been awake for days, even if you've only been up an hour. And when you're out on those frozen highways, with nothing but whiteout on all sides, you start to think maybe the night itself is alive. That's what Daryl thought, the night he found the Midnight Sun Motel. He'd been on the road for 12 straight hours, hauling freight north toward Prudhoe Bay. The storm had rolled in fast, blinding, whipping snow across the highway until his wipers were useless. His CB radio cut out. The GPS froze on a blank screen. He couldn't see the divider lines, couldn't tell where road ended and ditch began. And then through the storm, a glow. Neon. Vacancy. The letters sputtered pink and blue against the snow, buzzing faintly like a dying insect. Above it, steady, unblinking, midnight sun. He almost cried with relief. A motel meant heat, a bed, shelter from the storm. He pulled into the lot, tires crunching over ice, headlights sweeping across a squat. Two-story building half buried in drifts. The siding was peeled and warped. Icicles hung jagged from the eaves like teeth. Only one window glowed yellow, the front office. Inside, the heat barely worked. The lobby smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic like rusted pipes. Behind the desk sat the clerk. Daryl swore later that the man didn't look real. His skin was pale as wax, almost translucent under the dim light. His eyes were cloudy like frostbite had frozen them over. When he spoke, it was a rasp, like static through broken speakers. One night? Daryl nodded. Tried to hand over his wallet. The clerk didn't take it. He just slid across a heavy brass key. Room 6, no receipt. No paperwork, just the key. The hallway was worse. The carpet squelched under his boots, damp and sticky. The air smelled of old smoke and mildew. Doors on either side were warped, swollen with frost. He found his room, colder than outside. The heater hummed but pushed only cold air. Wallpaper peeled in strips, sheets stiff, damp with age. But above the dresser, the mirror. Perfectly clean. No dust, no cracks. Too clean. When Daryl looked into it just for a moment, he thought he saw his reflection blink, late. A fraction of a second behind him. He shook it off. Exhaustion. Just exhaustion. He collapsed onto the bed and shut his eyes. That's when the footsteps started. Slow, deliberate, out in the hall. Back and forth. He held his breath, listened. 3 knocks. Soft, measured. He crept to the peephole. Nothing. The hallway stretched too long, darker than it should have been. Then he turned and froze. The mirror. His reflection wasn't still. It was smiling, wide, hungry, and as he stared, the reflection leaned forward, pressing its palm against the glass. Frost spread outward from the touch, spider webbing across the surface. The knock came again, louder this time. The handle rattled, metal straining like someone trying to force the door, and a voice whispering through the crack, "You're already checked in." Daryl stumbled back, tripping over the bed. Heart hammering. He grabbed his bag, and the mirror fogged over. A face pressed against the other side, grinning wide. The door creaked open. He bolted. Down the hall, boots slamming against carpet. Doors stood open now. And in every room, figures, watching, families in faded clothes, men in hard hats, women in fur coats, children clutching toys, all pale, all hollow-eyed, all smiling. The lights flickered. The hall stretched longer and longer, doors multiplying, warping. His breath fogged in the air, each exhale freezing in front of him. He burst into the lobby, but it wasn't the same. The clerk was gone. The desk abandoned. The guest book lay open, pages filled with the same words scrawled over and over, guest. The neon sign outside flickered, buzzing, then went dark. The walls groaned. The floor tilted. Hallways branched where none had been before. Every door led deeper inside. And at the end of the lobby, a mirror. Not the small one from his room. This one filled the wall, and his reflection was waiting. It stepped forward out of sync, moving before he did, grinning. It raised its hand, pressed against the glass. The surface rippled like water. Behind him, the voices began. Dozens layered over each other, men and women and children, whispering, laughing, crying, all overlapping until it was unbearable. And then clear above them all, checkout isn't until morning. He sprinted, crashing into the door, tumbling into the snow. He didn't stop, didn't look back. Just ran through the storm until his rig came into view, half buried in the lot. He drove blind, tires screaming over ice. The storm swallowed the motel whole behind him. Hours later, at a truck stop, shaking, he told another driver what he'd seen. The man just stared. "That place burned down in '82, he said. Whole building leveled. 12 people died inside. No one's checked in since. Daryl swears he still had the key. Cold brass, etched with the number 6. And when he looks too long in a mirror, sometimes he sees his reflection smile before he does." Alaska doesn't whisper. It groans, it cracks, it howls. And sometimes, in the deep of winter, when the cold has frozen the world solid and you're the only soul for miles, it feels like something beneath the ice is whispering back. That's what Carter learned the winter he took the lineman job up near Kotzebue. He wasn't new to the cold. He'd worked pipelines, frozen rigs, cabins so isolated you could scream your lungs out and never hear the echo. But this was different. The storms in January came sudden and brutal, whiteouts that swallowed everything. The company put him up in a single-room cabin by the inlet, with a propane heater, a cot, and a battered radio for nightly check-ins. No TV, no distractions, just miles of frozen wilderness pressing in. On his second night, the storm had passed, leaving the cabin in a silence so heavy it made his ears ring. He sat at the desk writing notes by lantern light when the radio crackled alive. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" He froze. The voice was faint, warbled, as if it was broadcasting through water. He leaned in, adjusted the dial. "This is Carter, lineman 42. Who's calling?" Static. Then, "Please." "Can you hear me?" It was a woman's voice, thin, trembling. "Where are you?" he asked. The reply was so faint he almost didn't catch it. "Under the ice." Carter sat back. A prank, he told himself. Radio signals bounced strange in weather like this. Maybe fishermen on another channel. He tried again. Silence. Just the heater clicking in the corner. Hours later, as he lay on the cot trying to sleep, the radio hissed again. "It's so cold. Help me." His eyes snapped open. He didn't answer this time. He just listened. The voice dragged off into static, leaving him in the dark with his pounding heartbeat. At dawn, he stepped outside, trying to shake the unease. The inlet stretched flat and white to the horizon, smooth as glass. His boots crunched in the silence. Halfway across, he felt it. A vibration, subtle but there. He crouched, pressed a gloved hand to the ice. Cold knifed through his bones. And then 3 knocks, sharp, deliberate. He ripped his hand away, stumbling back, breath fogging fast. The ice groaned beneath him, low and long, like something alive. That night, he left the radio off, sat in silence, staring at frost crawling across the window. But silence didn't save him. The voice came again. Not from the radio, from outside. "Please, I'm still here." Right against the cabin wall. He jumped up, heart hammering, grabbed his coat and threw open the door. Nothing. Just the frozen inlet glowing under the moon. The world so still he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. But then clearer than ever. "It's so cold! Help me!" He stepped onto the ice with his lantern, each footfall echoing across the frozen sheet. The air burned with every breath. And then, just within the glow, something shifted below. A face, pressed flat against the underside of the ice. Pale skin, lips blue, eyes open, staring straight at him. Carter dropped the lantern. Its flame hissed out in the snow. He staggered back as cracks webbed across the surface. The face slid beneath him, following as if swimming under the ice. He bolted for the cabin, slammed the door, shoved the table against it. Then came the sound. Tapping. Dozens of taps circling the cabin, crawling along the frozen ground, like fingers drumming against glass. Faster and faster until the walls themselves shook. then silence. He sat there, clutching the radio, too terrified to breathe. Minutes dragged into hours. Finally, exhaustion pulled him under. At dawn, the world was still again. He forced himself to the inlet and stopped dead. The ice was shattered in places. Water pooled black around jagged edges. And there, frozen in a slab, a scarf fluttered in the wind. Red wool, frayed with age. He called base, voice cracking, described what happened. The operator was quiet, then finally said, 2 winters ago, a supply truck went through that ice. The driver, a woman, never made it out. Body was never recovered. That night, Carter didn't sleep. He sat with the lantern lit, every shadow a threat. Around midnight, the radio flickered on again. Carter. This time, the voice said his name. He snapped to attention. His throat went dry. Carter, under the ice. Please! He slammed the radio off, stared at the silent box until dawn. But it didn't stop. On his last night at the cabin, he woke to the sound of water dripping inside. He sat up, lantern shaking in his hand, and saw it. The floorboards were wet, frost spreading outward in rings, and from the cracks between the planks, tiny rivulets of water leaked up, pooling cold around his boots. A face rose in the reflection. The same pale face, staring from the floor itself, mouth opening and closing, like it was screaming beneath a surface. No one else could see. The boards groaned. Water surged higher, and he ran. He didn't pack, didn't radio, just sprinted into the dark until his lungs burned. He found the road, flagged down a plow, and never looked back. To this day, Carter won't go near frozen lakes, won't even skate on a rink. He says if he stands too long on the ice, he feels the knock, 1, 2, 3. And if he listens close enough, he still hears the voice. It's so cold, help me. Alaska is already cruel enough without monsters. The snow blinds, the ice shatters roads, and the wind steals the air straight from your lungs. But inside the storms, in the white where nothing should move at all, something walks. They call him the Blizzard Man, a story for tourists, most say. A trick of the eyes, a shadow in the snow. But ask the truckers who drive the Dalton Highway, ask the bush pilots who fly across the Yukon, ask the hunters who vanish in their cabins, and they'll tell you the storm isn't empty. They'll tell you the storm has eyes, and when it finds you, it circles. The first account goes back to 1913, a mining camp outside, Nome. Winter had buried the valley so deep the men had to dig tunnels between their shacks just to move between them. A blizzard pinned them inside for 6 straight days. When it finally broke, one man, Henry Lasker, was gone. His boots were still by the door, his coat still on the hook. The others searched. They found barefoot prints outside his cabin, circling it in wide loops, over and over. No starting point, no ending. Just circles pressed deep into the snow, then vanishing where the storm swallowed them whole. The men left Alaska the following spring. They never returned. And the ones who lived long enough told their children that if the storm goes too still, too quiet, don't look out the window, because something will be standing there. Decades later, 1987, Randall Poe, a trucker on the Dalton Highway, drove headlong into a whiteout. They found his rig 2 days later. Engine still running, heater blasting, headlights weak behind ice. The door was wide open. His boots were still inside. Tracks led away into the storm, bare feet. Straight lines into the white, no return. Rescuers followed for a mile before the storm buried the path. They said it was impossible. Nobody survives barefoot in that cold for 5 minutes, let alone hours. But drivers still see him, a figure on the roadside during storms. Too tall, too still, face swallowed by blowing snow. If you blink, he's closer. The next story is the one that freezes me. 1994, bush pilot. Logan Devereaux was trapped in a hunting shack during a storm. His logbook was still on the table when rescuers came weeks later. Day 1, winds rising. Shack's drafty, but it'll hold. Day 2, saw something in the white. Looked like a man at first. No coat. Thought it was a trick of the snow. It didn't move. Day 3, he's closer. Not drifting like the storm. Just standing. No face. Day 4, he's circling now. Tracks outside, but none leading in. Just round and round and round. Scraping the walls at night. The writing breaks off mid-sentence. Outside, the snow was stamped with circles, dozens of them, barefoot, like something pacing, but no tracks left the circle. 2002, a man named Tyler was driving outside Anchorage when the storm forced him off the road. His car stalled. He stayed inside, breath fogging the windows, ice crawling across the windshield. At 2 in the morning, he saw a figure in the road, tall, draped in furs that fluttered, though there was no wind. Relief hit him like fire. He shouted, banged on the glass. But when the figure turned, his voice caught. There was no face, just snow shifting like flesh, blank and twisting, as if the storm itself was staring back. The locks on his doors clicked open, one after another. The handle lifted. He threw his weight against the door, pressing it closed. Frost spreading over the glass and jagged. Fingers as something leaned closer from outside. Then silence. When morning came, the figure was gone. But outside the car, barefoot prints circled and circled, over and over, deeper and deeper, as if whatever it was had waited all night for him to open the door. Tyler still sees him, he says. Every storm since, always closer. And then the hikers. Just a few winters ago, a pair of college kids tried to trek a trail near Denali during a snowstorm. Only one made it back. She stumbled into a ranger station half dead. Shoes shredded, skin frostbitten black. She never spoke above a whisper. Just said the snow wasn't empty, that something followed them. The ranger who treated her swears she said this. It walked barefoot, didn't sink, didn't breathe. Just circled us all night waiting. He took him when the fire went out. Her friend was never found. Only a ring of footprints frozen into the ground around their dead fire. Nobody agrees on what the Blizzard Man is. Some say he's the first men who froze on the tundra. Their bodies lost to the snow. Their hunger carried on in the storm. Others claim he's no man at all, just the cold itself. Given shape, given patience. But the rules always repeat. He doesn't chase, he circles. He doesn't knock, he waits. And once you've seen him, you keep seeing him. Truckers leave their engines running while they sleep. Pilots refuse to take off when the weather feels too still. Hunters board their cabin doors when the wind dies down too fast. Because they know the danger isn't when the storm rages. The danger is when it stops, when the snow slows, when the wind cuts and the night goes too quiet. That's when you look outside. And if you see a shape standing there, unmoving, watching, don't wave, don't shout, don't open the door. Because once the Blizzard Man circles you, he'll circle until the cold gets in. And when it does, you won't walk back. Alaska has its fair share of ghost stories, but not all of them walk on the ground. Some of them hang in the sky. The town of Noatak is small. A strip of houses along the river, a school, a few stores, nothing more. In the winter, the nights stretch for weeks, and the only light comes from the aurora. But for decades, people in Noatak have whispered about other lights, lights that don't move like the aurora, that don't belong to stars. The elders warned their children, if you see the lights dancing too low, don't look, don't follow, because those who do never come back the same. Hey. The first story goes, back to 1931, hunters returning to the village spoke of a glow on the horizon, not fire, not northern lights, a pale blue shimmer that pulsed like breath. One hunter, Matuk, went toward it. He said it wasn't far, maybe a hill away. But when he came back, his hair was white as snow, his voice gone, his eyes staring like glass. He died 2 days later, whispering in a language no one knew. The elders buried him in stone, far from the village, and the warning spread. Hey. Fast forward to 1967. A school teacher named Joseph Price kept a journal in Noatak during the long winter. He wrote about hearing a hum at night so low it rattled the glass. He asked the locals what it was. They told him not to ask. Then in January, his entries changed. Saw lights last night. Not aurora. Too low. Almost touching the river. They blinked in patterns like signals. A week later, they came closer. Whole cabin filled with blue light. Couldn't move. Felt pulled. The last entry. The humming is inside my head now. If I look long enough, I see shapes inside the light. They're waiting for me. He was found wandering barefoot on the ice, skin frostbitten black. He died before they reached help, but his journal was there, pages warped with frozen water. Hey. The strangest case came in 1982. A group of snowmobilers out of Kotzebue reported seeing strange lights above Noatak Valley. They said the lights moved against the storm, slicing through the wind like blades, stopping dead in midair before vanishing all at once. 2 of the riders never came home. Their machines were found days later, engines off, untouched. The helmets lay neatly beside them, but the men were gone. The snow around them was smooth. No tracks, no struggle. Just empty white. Hey. And it isn't just old stories. In 2015, a fisherman named Daniel Peters recorded something on his phone near the Kobuk River. His voice shakes through the static. "There's a light. It's not the aurora. It's moving. It's moving too close." Then silence. His body was found the next day on the riverbank. Frozen solid, eyes wide, mouth open like he had been screaming. But there were no signs of struggle. His phone was in his coat pocket, still recording, battery dead. The last sound before it cut off was a hum, low and steady like something vibrating in the sky. Hey. The people of Noatak will still tell you what their grandparents told them. The lights come during the longest nights, when the sky is clear, when the aurora moves wrong. They say if you look too long, you'll hear the hum. If you hear the hum, you'll see the shapes. And if you see the shapes, you'll walk toward them, always barefoot, always silent. Some think it's government tests, strange aircraft, or tricks of the atmosphere. But the elders shake their heads. They say it's older than planes, older than people, something that waits in the sky for those foolish enough to stare. So if you ever find yourself in Noatak, and the aurora looks too bright, too close, and the humming crawls down into your bones, don't go outside. Don't look up, because the lights don't just want to be seen, they want you to follow. And once you do, the sky won't let you back. Alaska was never meant for people. The land itself feels alive, watching, waiting, swallowing anything foolish enough to stay too long. The cold doesn't just freeze flesh, it gnaws at it, as though the snow itself carries teeth. And in the endless dark of winter, when the sun doesn't rise for weeks, that's when they come. Most outsiders never hear about them. Tourists vanish every year. But the reports get buried under headlines about blizzards. Lost hikers, frostbite? Locals don't talk much. If they do, they whisper about the things in the ice. Shapes that move when the wind dies. Faces pressed against the frosted window of your cabin even though you're miles away from the nearest road. It began with a group of researchers sent north to study glacial shifts. 5 of them. They set up camp near an abandoned mining town, half swallowed by snow. The cabins stood hollow, their wooden frames rotting, their doors hanging off hinges as though something had clawed them open from the inside. They laughed at the place, brushed it off as relics of isolation. But on the first night, the laughter died. One of them, Mark, swore he saw lights deep in the forest. Not lanterns, not fire. Pale, flickering blue flames that floated between the trees. He said they looked like souls caught in glass, swaying in the air. No one believed him until the second night, when the screams came. They didn't come from outside. They came from beneath the floorboards. The sound of people screaming, muffled, as though trapped in the frozen earth. The group tore through the cabin floor with axes, convinced it was a prank or maybe trapped animals. All they found was solid ice, black with cracks spiderwebbing into the dark. And as the screams died away, a faint knock rose up from below, rhythmic, like something knocking back. By the third night, one of them was gone. Sarah. Her sleeping bag was shredded open, her boots missing, the door wide. They searched until their lungs burned with cold, calling her name, stumbling through knee-deep snow. They found her tracks leading toward the frozen lake. But halfway across, the tracks stopped. Just stopped, as though she had vanished mid-step. The ice beneath was unbroken, but pressed into the frost. In a wide circle around her last footprint were dozens of bare footprints, small, child-sized. The group tried to leave, but the storm cut them off. Whiteout conditions, the world swallowed by snow, the horizon erased. They were trapped in that mining town, the shadows of cabins looming like black teeth through the storm. And every night, the knocking came back, louder, closer, until they realized the knocks weren't coming from beneath the floor. Anymore, they were coming from the walls. One by one, they began to lose their grip. Mark was found sitting outside in the snow, muttering about the blue flames, his lips split and black from frostbite. He swore the lights were leading him somewhere safe, that the children wanted him to follow. They dragged him back inside, but that night he was gone. The door unlatched, his coat still hanging on the hook. They never saw him again. By now, only 3 remained. And that's when they began to see them. Not full forms at first, just shapes. A shadow slipping between the cabins even though there was no moon to cast it. Fingers dragging across frosted glass, leaving long streaks as though the ice itself melted under their touch. Faces in the window. Pale gray eyes sunk in black. Children, dozens of them, standing in the snow, silent, watching. One night the door burst open and the children came. They didn't walk. They glided, their bodies jerking as though they were half-frozen puppets pulled by strings. Their mouths opened in unison, releasing a sound that wasn't a scream, wasn't a cry, but something in between, a chorus of voices, hollow and ancient. The remaining 3 fought to escape, stumbling through the storm, blinded by snow. Only one made it back, barely alive, half-frozen, found weeks later by a search team. He never gave his name again. They said he refused to speak for months, and when he finally did, it was only one sentence, whispered over and over until his throat bled. The children are still there. They never leave. And in Alaska, they say if you walk alone on the frozen lakes at night, you'll hear it too. The knocking beneath the ice, the muffled screams, the sound of small bare feet crunching in the snow behind you. And if you ever see the blue flames, don't follow them. Because once you do, the children will never let you go.